You know how in most stories there are good bits and bad bits, there are light bits and dark bits, there are good guys and bad guys. In any story there's bits that you don't like. If you're watching it online, you probably scroll through them a little bit. If you're reading through it, you flick over the page. If you remember it, then you try and rush past those bits. Because in every story there's dark and light. And our story, our big story, is of course no different to that. There are parts which we celebrate and which we're proud of and which we enjoy retelling. And there are parts of our story which we're honestly a bit embarrassed about, which are shameful, which are dark, which we don't enjoy everybody knowing, which we don't retell around the dinner table. And now this little chapter of our story is one of those moments. It's a dark moment. It's a moment that we don't like to celebrate and put out front and centre on the cover of the book. Often there's been moments in our story so far which are a little bit like that, and they're often around maybe one person, maybe a family, that they get things wrong for a period of time. We all do that, hey? But now we see a chapter in our story where things go well off the rails, go dark fast, and it lasts for a long time. Now remember, God has chosen a family and he's formed them into a people group, and he's given them the task to let the whole world know, every people group know, that they are blessed. To bless them in the name of the God of love. In other words, to be kind to them and generous to them, to protect them and to love them and to serve them. Not only the people and their neighbours, they're to do that to the land and to creation and to look after everything that they see. This code had, don't have any other gods. Don't make statues out of pieces of wood or precious metals or stones. Honour your father and mother. Serve those around you. Welcome those from other nations into your midst. Be kind to those who need food. Be generous towards those who don't have enough. That was the way God's people were supposed to declare and communicate the blessing of God to everybody. And whilst they're doing that, they're supposed to rely on the strength of God rather than their own strength. Because as we've seen, it's God who is their rescuer. When they're in trouble, it's God that gets them out of trouble. It's God that sustains them during the dark days. It's God that has given them this promised land, having rescued them from Egypt. But now we begin a pattern which, if we're honest, not only does it repeat again and again and again throughout the Bible, but it repeats again and again and again throughout my life, and I'm going to guess yours. The pattern goes something like this, that people worship God, they love God, they try and do their best, and oftentimes things seem to go well for them. So they forget about God and they decide that they must have been the important ones in the first place. Imagine getting a whole great crop at the end of harvest. Maybe the first time that happens, you worship God if you're the farmer and say, thank you for sending the rain and the sun and providing the earth and giving us this great crop that we can eat throughout the long winter. Well, the second or third time that happens, you think, hold on a minute. I'm a great farmer. It's me. I'm the one who's doing this. And this kind of stuff happens again and again and again. People think, oh, it's me. I'm going to rely on my wisdom and my strength. For instance, Gideon, who we met last week, who, even though he was a bit of a coward, God used him to defeat a massive army with a tiny army of 300 people. It was a miracle. It was crazy. It's in the Bible because it's a remarkable story. Well, what does Gideon do right after that? You'd think he'd say thank you to God, right? But instead he goes and gets all the gold from the army that he's beaten and he makes a statue and starts worshipping the statue. Because he's trying to do it like everybody else does it, and he's trying to do it in his own strength. So he builds a statue that's bigger and better than anybody else's. A little bit after him, this other guy comes called Samson, and he's a bit of a leader and a bit of a ruler and one of the judges that oversees the people of God at this time. And he's like one of those cartoon superheroes, super muscly, super powerful, and there's all these tales of just how amazing Samson is because he's so strong. Well, what happens when you're so strong? You think it's all about yourself. You forget that maybe your strength was a gift given to you by anybody else. And Samson abuses his gift and he doesn't use it for good and he uses it for his own advantage. And in this part of the story, there's a repetitive, continual failure to acknowledge and live by the ways of God. And it doesn't go well. There's blood and violence and shame and abuse, and it's grim reading, and nobody comes out of it well. In fact, throughout the story, this little part of it in the Bible, you can read this sentence which pops up again and again, and it reminds the reader, that's you and I, what's going on and why. It says, at this time, Israel had no king, and everybody did as they wanted. There's a massive clue in that sentence. Everybody doing what they wanted, not what was necessarily wisest or kindest or the most loving or offered the most protection to other people, not necessarily the thing that blessed others and showed them love, but instead the thing that made my kingdom and my empire bigger, the thing that made me more famous, the thing that meant that I had more stuff, the thing that meant I couldn't be questioned by anybody else because I've got my way, thank you very much, and everybody else can do one. So, what do we learn today? Number one, I don't know why, but I can't change it. It seems to be that everybody has good days when they get things right and bad days when they get things wrong. What I want to do is try and make sure that the good days outnumber the bad days. Number two, it can happen fast that a group of people who were representing God, who were displaying the blessing of God to all people, suddenly become self-absorbed and want to gather riches for themselves and think it's all about them. It can happen to anybody. It's important that I and we remain on our guard and vigilant, making sure that always we're caught up in God and His way and blessing people around us lovingly and generously, rather than thinking, how brilliant am I? I'm so great. Number three, which is why a community, a village is important, because sometimes I go off track. Sometimes I'm not loving and patient and kind and protective and generous. And I need other friends around me to say, Paul, back over here. Get on the way of Jesus. Number four, the sticky truth is that sometimes being in the kingdom of the King is sometimes, it feels a little bit restrictive. But that's only ever because I want to push the boundaries and get more fame, glory, power, attention, money, whatever, for me. The way of the kingdom is about doing what God leads us to rather than what I want to for my glory. And so now we're left with a dark chapter, a part of our story that we're not proud with, that's filled with people who sometimes get things right, and God still seems to use them in His mercy, and I don't understand that. But often they get things wrong, and they hurt, and they kill, and they destroy, and they are not people that we would want to hang out with. And at the end of that chapter, we have this hope on the horizon that there might be a king on the way.